The garlic sizzled in the pan, releasing that sharp, sweet aroma that never failed to transport me somewhere else, somewhere better. My worn chef's clogs squeaked against the grease-stained kitchen tiles as I moved between stations, orchestrating chaos into cuisine. Steam rose around me like stage fog, and without thinking, the melody slipped from my lips. Sous le ciel de Paris s'envole une chanson. Under the Paris sky, a song takes flight, my grandmother's favorite. The words felt like home, even though I'd never been further than 2 states over. The line cooks had stopped commenting on my singing months ago. Now it was just part of the soundtrack, like the hiss of the fryers and the barked orders during dinner rush. I plated the coq au vin with hands that had learned precision through repetition, wiping the edge of the plate with my towel before sliding it onto the pass. Behind me, Marcus, our sous chef, muttered something about the reservation list being insane tonight. I didn't look up. Thursday nights were always busy, but lately our little bistro had been packed beyond capacity. New ownership, they said. Some investor had bought the failing restaurant 6 weeks ago, poured money into renovations, and somehow transformed our struggling establishment into the hottest reservation in the city. I should have been grateful. The paychecks had finally started clearing, but something felt different. Wrong, maybe. Or just unfamiliar in a way that made my shoulders tense. The kitchen doors swung open with their usual violence, and Jerry, our head server, stuck his head through. "Table 12 wants to speak to the chef," he announced, his voice pitched with that particular anxiety reserved for VIP guests. I glanced at the ticket rail, sauce reduction bubbling on the stove behind me. "We're in the middle of service," I called back, adjusting the heat. "Whatever it is, I'll deal with it after." "It's not a complaint," Jerry insisted. "He's been here 4 nights this week, always asks about the chef, always leaves a card." My hand stilled on the pan handle. 4 nights. I'd noticed the orders, actually. Table 12, always the same table. Always ordered off menu items that required me to actually cook, not just reheat and plate. Duck confit. Bouillabaisse. Things that took time and attention. Things that made me sing a little louder as I worked, because the complexity demanded the comfort of my grandmother's songs. "Tell him I'm flattered. But I'm working," I said, turning back to my station. Jerry hesitated, then disappeared back through the doors. The rest of service blurred past in the usual frenzy. Plates out, tickets in, the rhythm of a well-oiled machine that ran on adrenaline and muscle memory. It wasn't until we'd served the last dessert and the kitchen staff began their closing rituals that I finally pulled off my chef's coat and let myself breathe. The dining room had emptied except for the cleaning crew and 1 table. Table 12. I could see him through the small window in the kitchen door. Dark suit, darker hair, sitting with the stillness of someone accustomed to being waited on. A tumbler of whiskey caught the low light, amber liquid barely touched. Something about his posture, the way he occupied space, made me hesitate. I'd grown up around powerful men. My father had been a union boss. My brothers had followed into construction management. I knew the language of authority, could read it in the set of shoulders and the angle of a jaw. This man spoke it fluently. The card Jerry had mentioned sat on the prep station, cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. Dante Caruso. No title, no company name, just a phone number in understated print. I should have thrown it away. Instead, I found myself pushing through the kitchen doors, my civilian clothes, jeans, and a fitted black shirt, feeling inadequate in a way my chef's whites never did. He looked up before I'd taken 3 steps, as if he'd been waiting for the sound of the door. Eyes like smoke, gray and unreadable, tracked my approach. Up close, he was younger than I'd assumed, mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that fashion magazines would call classically handsome. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips that looked like they rarely curved into anything resembling warmth. But it was his eyes that held me. Patient, assessing, dangerous in a way I couldn't quite name. "You asked to see the chef," I said, stopping a careful distance from his table. "I'm Amélie Rousseau." Something flickered across his features. Surprise, maybe, though it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." "Please." It wasn't really a request, despite the please. I remained standing. "I have closing duties. What can I do for you, Mr. Caruso?" He studied me for a long moment, then lifted his whiskey glass, taking a slow sip before setting it down with deliberate care. "You sing while you cook." It wasn't a question. Heat crawled up my neck. The kitchen isn't soundproofed. If it's disturbing the dining experience, I can stop. "No," he said, and something in his voice shifted. "Don't stop." I waited for him to elaborate. He didn't. The silence stretched between us, filled with the distant clatter of dishes being washed and chairs being stacked on tables. "Your coq au vin," he finally continued, "is exactly as it should be, which means you learned from someone who understood French technique, not a culinary school. Somewhere real." "My grandmother," I said before I could think better of it. "She was from Lyon, moved here after the war." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something. "And the songs, also from her. Also from her." I crossed my arms, suddenly defensive. "Look, if you're here to critique my cooking or my unprofessional behavior, I'm sorry. But I'm not going to apologize for singing. It's how I think, how I work." "I'm not here to critique anything," Dante said. "I'm here because in 6 weeks of owning this restaurant, you're the first thing that's felt authentic." The words landed like a physical touch. Owning this restaurant. Of course, the mysterious investor, the sudden influx of cash, and the impossible reservations. I should have guessed. "You're the new owner," I said flatly. He inclined his head. "Among other things." Other things. The phrase hung in the air, loaded with implications I didn't want to examine. "I own several restaurants," he clarified, his gaze never leaving mine. "Hotels? Properties? This is the smallest acquisition in my portfolio, but it's become the most interesting. Because of the food? Because of you. The directness of it stole my breath. Men like him, wealthy men, powerful men, didn't speak to women like me this way. Not in my experience. We were background noise, service industry props, forgettable the moment the check was paid." "I don't know what you're looking for," I said carefully. "But I'm just here to cook. I'm not interested in whatever else you think this is." "What do you think this is?" he countered, his tone mild, but his eyes sharp. "I think you're a wealthy man who's used to getting what he wants," I replied. "And I think you're bored." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Fair assessment. Incomplete, but fair. He stood, and I realized how tall he was. 6'2", maybe more. The suit was custom, obviously expensive, but understated in a way that spoke of old money rather than new. "What if I told you I've rejected 50 arranged marriages in the last 3 years?" he said conversationally, reaching for his coat draped over the back of his chair. 50 women from appropriate families, with appropriate connections. All perfectly acceptable matches. "I would say that sounds like a personal problem," I managed, thrown by the non sequitur. He shrugged into his coat with economical grace. It was. Until 6 weeks ago when I walked through that kitchen and heard someone singing Edith Piaf while reducing a beurre blanc. Then it became a different kind of problem. He pulled a wallet from his inner pocket, extracting several bills and placing them on the table. Far more than any meal cost. "This is too much," I started. "It's not for the food," he interrupted. "It's for the concert. Keep singing, Amélie. I'll keep listening." He was halfway to the door before I found my voice. "Mr. Caruso." He paused, glancing back. "I'm not for sale. Whatever you think you're buying with your generosity, Whatever you think is going to happen here, you're wrong. That almost smile returned. Good, he said simply. I'd be disappointed if you were. Then he was gone, leaving me standing in an empty dining room with too much cash in my hand and too many questions crowding my head. The next week, he came every night, sometimes alone, sometimes with men in similar suits, who spoke in low voices and never seemed to smile. He always ordered dishes that required my personal attention, always left excessive tips, and always watched the kitchen through whatever sightline was available. I pretended not to notice. It should have been creepy. Should have sent me straight to management, or better yet, straight to the police. But there was something about the way he watched that didn't feel predatory. It felt like attention. Real attention. The kind that saw beyond the chef's whites and the worn clogs, that heard something in my grandmother's songs that resonated with whatever darkness he carried. And God help me, I started singing louder. It was Marie, our pastry chef, who finally confronted me about it. She cornered me during prep on a Tuesday afternoon, her flour-dusted hands on her hips and her expression skeptical. So, are you going to tell me what's going on with the owner? She asked, watching me dice shallots with perhaps more aggression than necessary. Nothing's going on, I said. He's just a regular customer. Amelie. She loaded my name with disbelief. He's not just a regular anything. Do you know who Dante Caruso is? A wealthy investor with too much time on his hands. Try a wealthy investor whose family has owned half this city's port operations for 3 generations, Marie corrected. Try connections to city council, the waterfront union, and allegedly, though nobody says it out loud, certain business interests that don't show up in tax filings. My knife stilled against the cutting board. What are you saying? I'm saying, she continued, lowering her voice, that Dante Caruso is not just some restaurateur. He's a Caruso, as in the Caruso family. As in, you might want to be careful about whatever attention he's showing you. The shallots blurred slightly in my vision. I'd suspected, of course, the way people deferred to him, the quality of the men who accompanied him, the underlying current of controlled violence that seemed to hover in the air whenever he was present. But suspecting and knowing were different things. He's just eating dinner, I said, forcing my hands steady. That's all. If you say so, Marie replied, but her skepticism was clear. Just don't do anything stupid, okay? I've gotten used to having you around. The warning should have scared me away. Should have made me avoid eye contact, stop the singing, maybe even look for a new job. Instead, that night when he arrived at his usual time and took his usual table, I met his eyes through the kitchen window and sang a little bit louder. Padam, padam, il arrive en courant. Padam, padam, he comes running. My heart beating like a drum against my ribs as I plated his requested cassoulet, knowing he was listening. Knowing something had shifted between us in the space of a week, in the space of songs and silence and too many unanswered questions. It was midnight when I finally left through the back entrance, my chef's bag heavy on my shoulder and exhaustion settling into my bones. The alley smelled like rain and garbage, familiar and somehow comforting after the intensity of the kitchen. I didn't see him until I was halfway to the street. Dante leaned against a black sedan, smoke curling from a cigarette held loosely in his fingers. The ember glowed orange in the darkness, illuminating his face in brief flashes. He didn't startle when I stopped short, didn't even look surprised. This is inappropriate, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. You're lurking in alleys now. Waiting. He took a final drag and crushed the cigarette beneath his shoe. Not lurking. There's a difference, not from where I'm standing. He pushed off from the car, and I forced myself not to step back. The alley was narrow, the shadows deep, and we were very much alone. Amelie, he said, and the way he shaped my name sent a shiver down my spine. I need to ask you something. Are you afraid of me? The question caught me off guard. I should be, I replied honestly. According to my coworkers, you're dangerous. I am, he agreed without hesitation. Very dangerous. But that's not what I asked. I considered lying, considered the safe answer, the smart answer. But something about the directness in his eyes, the way he stood there waiting for truth rather than flattery, made me choose honesty instead. No, I said. I'm not afraid of you, but I don't understand you. And that's almost worse. What don't you understand? Why you're here. Why you keep coming back. Why you watch me like I'm something rare when you could have any woman in this city. I told you, he said, closing the distance between us with 2 measured steps. 50 arranged marriages. 50 perfectly acceptable women who understood my world, who came from families that aligned with business interests, who would have been practical choices. Practical, I echoed, the word tasting bitter. He was close enough now that I could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive with hints of cedar and smoke. Practical, he repeated, but not real. Not like someone who sings Piaf while cooking because her grandmother taught her that food and music are inseparable. Not like someone who turns down money because she thinks it's an insult to her integrity. Not like you. His hand came up slowly, giving me time to move away. I didn't. His fingers brushed my cheek, calloused in a way that surprised me, as if wealth hadn't erased the memory of work. What do you want from me? I whispered. Everything, he said simply. But I'll settle for dinner. I blinked. You have dinner with me every night. At your restaurant. My restaurant, he corrected. Where you're working and I'm watching. I want dinner where you're not in a kitchen and I'm not at a table. I want to hear you sing without the sound of sizzling oil. I want to know what made you choose cooking over whatever else you could have been. This is insane, I said, even as something in my chest cracked open at the intensity of his attention. You're insane. I'm aware. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe. Friday. I'll pick you up at 8. Wear something comfortable. We're not going anywhere that requires performance. I should have said no. Every rational instinct screamed at me to say no. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Where are we going?" "You'll see," Dante replied. Then he opened the sedan door, and I realized there was a driver I hadn't noticed, quiet and watchful in the front seat. "Good night, Amélie. Sing pretty songs tomorrow. I'll be listening." He slid into the back seat, and the car pulled away, leaving me standing in the alley with my pulse racing and the distinct feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more significant than dinner. Friday arrived faster than I wanted and slower than I could stand. I spent the day trying to focus on prep work, while Marie shot me knowing looks across the kitchen. "You're wearing makeup," she observed around 3 p.m. "You never wear makeup during prep." "It's just dinner," I muttered, focusing too intently on my knife work. "With Dante Caruso." "Just dinner." "Sure." I didn't have words to explain what I barely understood myself, how his attention felt different from anything I'd experienced, how the danger everyone warned me about felt less like threat and more like inevitability, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing the jump would change everything. At 7:30, I clocked out and changed in the cramped employee bathroom. The dress was simple, deep green with long sleeves. Nothing fancy, but nicer than my usual jeans and t-shirts. I'd left my hair down, dark waves falling past my shoulders, and applied just enough makeup to look intentional. When I emerged from the restaurant's back entrance at 8 exactly, Dante was there. Not in the sedan this time, but leaning against a different car, sleek and silver, clearly expensive, but understated. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, no suit, and the casual clothes somehow made him more dangerous rather than less. "You're punctual," he noted, opening the passenger door. "I'm a chef. Timing is everything." His almost smile appeared as I slid into the leather seat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The car smelled new, with hints of his cologne already embedded in the interior. He moved around to the driver's side with that economical grace I'd noticed before, every movement deliberate and controlled. "Where are we going?" I asked as he pulled into traffic. "Somewhere you can't be interrupted by ticket orders," he replied, "and somewhere I can actually hear you speak without a kitchen between us." We drove in comfortable silence through the city, the lights blurring past as we headed toward the waterfront. The docks at night were beautiful in a gritty way, industrial cranes silhouetted against the darkening sky, water reflecting the city lights in rippling patterns. Dante navigated the familiar streets with easy confidence, eventually pulling into a private parking area I didn't recognize. He came around to open my door, offering his hand. I took it, letting him help me out, his grip firm and warm and somehow reassuring. We walked toward what looked like a renovated warehouse, all exposed brick and massive windows, clearly expensive real estate. He used a key to unlock a side entrance, holding the door for me to enter first. Inside, the space took my breath away. It was a loft, obviously, but not the sterile modern kind. This felt lived in despite its size. A kitchen dominated one wall, professional-grade equipment that made my heart skip, and the rest of the space flowed into living areas with comfortable furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and art that looked original rather than decorative. But it was the table that caught my attention, set for two, with candles already lit, and the smell of something cooking filling the air with warmth and promise. "You cooked," I said, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "You actually cooked," Dante shrugged, moving toward the kitchen. "I'm not without skills, and I thought you might appreciate not having to work for your dinner. What are we having?" "Come see." I followed him to the kitchen, watching as he lifted the lid on a large pot. The aroma hit me immediately. Bouillabaisse. Real bouillabaisse. Rich with saffron and tomato and fish stock, the kind that took hours to build properly. "You made bouillabaisse," I said, something warm and unexpected blooming in my chest. "From scratch." "My grandmother taught me," he said, not looking at me as he stirred the pot. Before my father decided cooking was beneath our family, before everything became about business and alliances and maintaining appropriate appearances. She was from Marseille. I moved closer, peering into the pot. The seafood was perfectly cooked, the broth rich and complex, the kind of dish that spoke of love and patience and attention to detail. "You're full of surprises, Dante Caruso." He met my eyes then, and the intensity in his gaze made me catch my breath. "So are you, Amélie Rousseau. Let's eat before it gets cold." The meal was incredible, not just the food, though the bouillabaisse was genuinely excellent, but the ease of it. Dante poured wine, a crisp white that complemented the fish perfectly, and we ate with the comfortable rhythm of people who understood that food was meant to be savored, not rushed. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said, breaking bread with hands that I now noticed bore small scars, the kind that came from kitchen accidents and childhood mishaps. "What was she like?" "She was everything," I said, surprised by the emotion that welled up, fierce and funny, and completely uncompromising about food. She came here with nothing after the war, worked 3 jobs, but always made time to cook real food. Not shortcuts, not approximations. The real thing. She taught me that cooking is an act of love, that singing while you work is how you pour your soul into what you create. Dante nodded slowly. My grandmother was similar. She died when I was 14. But before that, she'd sneak me into the kitchen at our family estate and teach me properly. Not the showy stuff, but the fundamentals. How to respect ingredients, how to build flavors, how to feed people in a way that matters. What happened when she died? I asked, then immediately regretted the question. Sorry, that's too personal. Everything about this is personal, Amélie. He refilled our wine glasses. When she died, my father doubled down on preparing me for the family business. Cooking became a frivolous memory, something to be forgotten in favor of more serious pursuits. But I never forgot the feeling of creating something with my own hands, of feeding someone and seeing them truly satisfied. The family business, I said carefully. The restaurants? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Among other things. That phrase again, the one loaded with implications. The shipping operations, I said, remembering Marie's warning. The waterfront unions, the connections to city council, the business interests that don't show up in tax filings. His expression didn't change, but something shuddered in his eyes. You've been researching me. People talk. He nodded slowly, setting down his fork with deliberate care. Yes, they do. And most of what they say is probably true. I waited, heart hammering. Does that frighten you? He asked. Should it? That's not an answer. No, I said, deciding on honesty again. It doesn't frighten me. But I need to know what I'm walking into if whatever this is continues. What do you want to know? Everything. But let's start with why you rejected 50 marriages. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying me in the candlelight. Shall I be honest? I'd prefer it. Because they wanted Dante Caruso the heir, the successor, the man who would expand the family interests and secure advantageous alliances. None of them wanted me. The person who still remembers his grandmother's kitchen, who finds opera boring but loves jazz, who would rather spend an evening cooking than attending another charity gala where everyone is performing for everyone else. And what do you want? I asked. He reached across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. I took it, feeling the warmth of his skin, the calluses that marked him as more than just wealth and power. I want real, he said simply. I want someone who sings Piaf because it makes them happy, not because they think it's sophisticated. I want someone who will tell me I'm insane for lurking in alleys. I want someone who chooses me, not my name or my money or my connections. Just me. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in my chest. And you think that's me? I said, barely a whisper. I know it's you, he replied. I knew it the first time I walked through that kitchen and heard you singing about Paris skies like you were homesick for a place you'd never been. I knew it when you told me you weren't for sale. I knew it when you looked at me without fear, even after learning who I am. This is crazy, I said, but I didn't pull my hand away. We barely know each other. So let's change that, Dante said. Ask me anything. I'm an open book tonight. God, where to start? Why restaurants? I finally asked. If you have all these other business interests, why buy struggling bistros? Because food is honest, he said without hesitation. You can't fake good cooking. You can't lie in a well-made sauce. It's one of the few things in my world that's pure. And maybe, he added, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. I was looking for something pure. Someone pure. Or at least someone real. I'm not pure, I said, needing him to understand. I've made mistakes. I've failed at relationships. I'm drowning in student loans from culinary school. I work 80-hour weeks and still barely make rent. I'm not some innocent fantasy. Good, Dante replied. I don't want a fantasy. I want you. Complicated, exhausted, singing in French, real you. The conviction in his voice made me believe him. We finished dinner slowly, conversation flowing easier as we shared stories. He told me about growing up in a family where every action was calculated, every relationship transactional, every choice weighted with consequences. I told him about my father's disappointment when I chose culinary school over a practical degree, about burning out in New York at a Michelin-starred restaurant, about coming home to start over in a small bistro where I could actually breathe. He told me about the first time he defied his family's expectations, about the arranged marriage they'd practically finalized before he walked away, about the cold fury of his father when Dante announced he'd choose his own path. I told him about the man I'd almost married, who'd left when he realized I loved cooking more than I could ever love him, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people all day, but coming home to silence. We talked until the candles burned low and the wine bottle sat empty between us. I helped him clear the plates, and we moved to the living area, where he built a fire in the massive stone fireplace with practiced ease. The flames cast dancing shadows across the exposed brick, and I curled into the corner of a leather sofa that was probably older than I was, and infinitely more expensive. "Sing something," Dante said, settling beside me with a comfortable distance between us. "What?" "Just like that?" "Just like that. Something your grandmother taught you." I felt self-conscious in a way I never did in the kitchen, where the singing was just part of the process. But Dante waited with patient expectation, and something about the firelight and the wine and the ease of the evening loosened the hesitation. "La vie en rose," I began softly, the melody floating between us. "Des yeux qui font baisser les miens." My voice wasn't trained, not professionally, but it was true. Honest, the way Dante said cooking should be. Un rire qui se perd sur sa bouche. I closed my eyes, letting the words carry me, letting my grandmother's memory fill the space. Voilà le portrait sans retouche de l'homme auquel j'appartiens. When I finished, silence hung in the air, heavy with something I couldn't name. I opened my eyes to find Dante watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. Raw, unguarded, vulnerable in a way that made my breath catch. "That song," he said, his voice rough. "My grandmother used to sing it while she cooked. I'd forgotten until just now." The connection between us pulled taut, invisible but undeniable. "Come here," Dante said, and it wasn't a command. It was a plea. I moved across the space between us, and his arms came around me, pulling me against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and feel the warmth of him through his sweater. We sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just existing in the same space, in the same moment, in the same understanding that something significant was happening between us. "Thank you," he murmured against my hair, "for singing, for being here, for not running when you learned who I am. Thank you for dinner," I replied, "for trusting me with your grandmother's recipe, for showing me this instead of taking me somewhere expensive and impersonal." "This is better." He pulled back slightly, his hand coming up to cup my face. His thumb traced my cheekbone, his eyes searching mine for something I wasn't sure I understood. "I want to kiss you," he said, the honesty of it stealing my breath. "But I need you to want it too. This can't be about me taking. It has to be about us choosing." I didn't answer with words. Instead, I closed the distance between us, my lips meeting his in a kiss that started soft and questioning and quickly deepened into something more urgent. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I surrendered to the heat building between us, to the wanting that I'd been trying to deny all week. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. "Stay," he said. "Not for anything more than this. Just stay." I should have said no, should have maintained boundaries and taken things slow and been smart about falling for a dangerous man with a complicated life. Instead, I stayed. We moved to his bedroom eventually, but he was true to his word. We just held each other, talking in the darkness about dreams and fears and the strange inevitability of finding each other. His body was warm against mine, solid and safe. And for the first time in years, I fell asleep feeling like I belonged somewhere. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee. Dante stood in the kitchen, wearing dark jeans and nothing else, his back to me as he worked at the stove. The morning light caught the defined muscles of his shoulders, the ink of a tattoo I hadn't noticed the night before spreading across his ribs. Italian words I couldn't quite read from this distance. "Morning," I said, padding across the cold floor in his t-shirt that I'd borrowed sometime during the night. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face was genuine, unguarded, beautiful. "Morning." I made coffee. "And I'm attempting pancakes, though I should warn you they're not my specialty." I moved to his side, peering into the pan. "They look perfect," I said. And they did. Golden and fluffy, clearly made from scratch. "You're full of surprises, Dante Caruso." He set down the spatula and turned to me, his hand settling on my waist. "So are you, Amélie Rousseau. I wasn't sure you'd still be here when I woke up. Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Running. Most people run when they realize what they're getting involved with." I considered this, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "I probably should run," I admitted. "This is crazy. Moving fast, definitely complicated. But I'm not good at running from things I want. And I want this. I want you." His kiss was slow and thorough, tasting like coffee and promise. We ate breakfast at the counter, easy and comfortable, like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Afterward, he drove me home, a small apartment across town that suddenly felt even smaller and shabbier after the spaciousness of his loft. "This is me," I said, gesturing at the building with its peeling paint and questionable plumbing. Nothing fancy. Dante killed the engine, studying the building without judgment. "Can I see it? My apartment?" "It's not much, all the more reason to see it, to understand where you come from when you're not in my kitchen or my loft." The climb to the third floor felt longer than usual, my awareness of him behind me making every step self-conscious. I unlocked the door to my studio, taking in the space through his eyes. One room serving as bedroom, living room, and dining area. A kitchenette barely worthy of the name. Books stacked on every surface. Culinary magazines and notebooks filled with recipe attempts. A small desk crowded with bills and paperwork. It was cramped and cluttered, and unmistakably mine. "It's perfect," Dante said, and he sounded like he meant it. "It's honest. Like you." He moved through the space slowly, taking in details, pausing at the corkboard above my desk where I'd pinned photos. My grandmother in her restaurant in France before the war. My parents on their wedding day, me graduating from culinary school, exhausted and triumphant. "This is her?" he asked, pointing to my grandmother's photo. "That's her. Marie Rousseau, the woman who taught me everything that matters. She's beautiful. You have her eyes." I moved to stand beside him, looking at the photo I'd looked at 1,000 times. She used to say that cooking was the closest thing we have to magic, that with the right ingredients and the right intention, you could transport someone anywhere, make them feel anything. "That's why you sing while you cook," Dante said. "It's not just habit, it's magic, literally." I laughed, surprised by how well he understood. "Literally." He turned to me, his expression serious. "I want to support your career, Amélie. Not take over it. Not change it. Support it." "What does that mean?" "It means if you want to stay at the bistro, you stay. If you want to open your own place, I'll help make it happen. If you want to study in France, learn from your grandmother's contemporaries, I'll make sure it's possible. But it's your choice, your dream. I'm just here to make sure nothing stands in your way." The offer should have felt overwhelming, Instead, it felt like freedom. Nobody had ever offered to support my dreams without trying to reshape them, without wanting something in return. "What do you get out of this?" I asked, needing to understand. "You," he said simply. "Happy. Fulfilled. Singing in French while you create beautiful things. That's all I want." We spent the day together. He left to handle some business, whatever that meant, and I went to work for the evening service. But knowing he'd be there at table 12, knowing he'd be listening for my songs, knowing he'd be waiting for me after shift, changed everything. The kitchen felt different, brighter. The work felt purposeful in a way it hadn't before. And when I sang Sous le ciel de Paris while plating his requested pot au feu, I sang it directly to him through the kitchen window. He heard it. I knew because of the way his expression softened, the way his eyes found mine through the chaos, the way he mouthed "thank you" across the distance. The weeks that followed established a pattern. Dante came to the restaurant most nights, but now I joined him after service, sometimes at his loft, sometimes at my apartment that he never complained about despite its inadequacies. We cooked together when time allowed, his grandmother's recipes mixing with mine, creating something new and ours. He introduced me to his world gradually, not the dangerous parts, not yet, but the legitimate side, business dinners, where I met restaurateurs and chefs who spoke of him with respect mixed with caution. Charity events where I saw him navigate high society with practiced ease, while his hand never left the small of my back. Art openings, where he bought paintings worth more than I'd earn in a year, without blinking. And I introduced him to mine, Marie and the kitchen staff, who were suspicious at first, but gradually warmed to him when they saw how he treated me. My sister Clara, who pulled me aside to whisper warnings that I ignored, because her concerns, while valid, didn't account for how he made me feel. My former culinary instructor, who grilled him over dinner about his intentions until he won her over by discussing the proper temperature for tempering chocolate with the passion of someone who genuinely cared. It was perfect. Too perfect. And I should have known it couldn't last. The first crack appeared on a Thursday night. Dante arrived at the restaurant with 3 men I hadn't seen before. They wore the same type of suit, moved with the same controlled awareness, but something felt different. Harder. More dangerous. He ordered for the table, his usual dishes, but his attention was divided. They spoke in low voices throughout the meal, and twice I saw him check his phone with an expression that made my stomach tighten. When I emerged after service, he was alone by his car, smoking a cigarette with the intensity of someone using nicotine to manage stress. "Something's wrong," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "What happened?" "Business complication," Dante replied, not meeting my eyes. "Nothing for you to worry about." "That's not how this works," I said, moving closer. "You don't get to shut me out when things get difficult. We're past that." He finally looked at me, and the exhaustion in his face made me ache. "There's a situation with the shipping contract," he said carefully. "Some competitors who think they can push into territory that's been ours for 20 years. It needs to be handled." "Handled how?" "The kind of handling that you don't need to know about, Amelie. The kind that keeps you separate from parts of my life that aren't safe or pretty, or something I want you anywhere near." I stepped back, hurt flashing through me. "So that's it? You get to decide what I can handle, what I should know. This is exactly what everyone warned me about, that you'd be controlling and secretive and treat me like I'm fragile." "I'm not trying to control you," Dante said, his voice hardening. "I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference." "Is there?" I shot back, because from where I'm standing, it looks the same. Silence stretched between us, taut with tension and unspoken fears. Finally, Dante crushed his cigarette and closed the distance between us. "You want honesty? Real honesty about what I do and who I am?" "Fine." "Yes. I do business, Amelie, Real business. The kind that involves negotiations that don't happen in boardrooms. The kind that sometimes requires showing strength in ways that aren't legal or comfortable. The shipping operations, the unions, the waterfront control, it's all real. And sometimes, when people challenge that control, I have to respond in ways that would horrify you. Violence? I asked, forcing the word out. Sometimes. Not always. Not even often anymore. But sometimes, yes, violence or the threat of it is necessary to maintain order, to protect what's ours, to make sure smaller operators who rely on our protection aren't crushed by larger competitors who don't care about anything but profit. His brutal honesty was somehow more comforting than any lie would have been. "Does it bother you?" he asked, "knowing what I'm capable of? What I've probably done?" "It should," I said slowly. "Everything about this should bother me. But it doesn't. Not the way it should. Maybe that makes me complicit. Maybe it makes me naive. But I look at you, and I don't see a monster. I see someone who makes bouillabaisse from his grandmother's recipe and listens to me sing Piaf like it's the most beautiful sound in the world." Dante pulled me against him, his arms tight around me. "You're not naive," he said into my hair. "You're seeing clearly. I'm not a good man, Amelie. I've done things. I'll probably do more things that can't be justified or explained away. But I'm trying to build something different, something more legitimate. For my sister, for the people who work for me. For you, the situation tonight?" I asked. "What happens now?" "I handle it. My way. But I come back to you. That's the deal. You don't ask for details, and I don't bring that world into your kitchen or your life more than necessary. Can you live with that?" I thought about it, really thought about it, about the implications of loving a man whose business sometimes required darkness, about the moral gray areas I'd be inhabiting just by staying, about whether I was strong enough to separate the man from the methods. "Yes," I said finally, "but on one condition. Anything. If it ever becomes too much, if you ever cross a line I can't accept, I need you to let me walk away. No threats, no pressure, no trying to keep me if I decide I can't do this." "Done," Dante agreed immediately, though I don't think you understand how much I'm hoping that day never comes. So am I. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, like sealing a bargain, like making a promise. When he pulled away, some of the tension had left his shoulders. "I have to go," he said. "This thing tonight can't wait. But I'll call you after. And tomorrow we'll do something normal. Whatever you want." "I want to cook with you," I said. "Just us. Your kitchen, no pressure. I want to teach you my grandmother's coq au vin properly. It's a deal." He kissed me once more, then climbed into his car. I watched the tail lights disappear, and for the first time, I felt the weight of what I'd chosen, the uncertainty, the danger, the knowledge that loving Dante Caruso meant accepting parts of him that lived in shadows. But I also felt the certainty of it, the rightness, the understanding that some connections transcend logic and safety and everything that should matter. He called at 3 a.m. I answered on the first ring, relief flooding through me at the sound of his voice. "It's done," he said, sounding exhausted. "Handled. Nobody got hurt. It's just business now." "Come over," I said. "I don't care what time it is. Come over." 20 minutes later, he was at my door. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. I just held him while he let down the armor he wore for the rest of the world, while he allowed himself to be vulnerable in a way I suspected he rarely permitted. And in the morning, we cooked, his grandmother's bouillabaisse meeting mine's coq au vin, French traditions blending in an American kitchen, while we sang together, badly and off-key, about Paris and love and life that persists despite everything. The weeks turned into months. The situation with the competitors resolved itself, though I never asked for details. Dante kept his word about keeping me separate from the darker aspects of his business, but he stopped hiding the reality of it. I met more of his associates, learning to read the difference between the legitimate business contacts and the ones who operated in grayer areas. I learned which questions to ask and which silences to respect, and slowly his family began to take notice. His sister Julia came first. She showed up at the restaurant on a night Dante wasn't there, taking a table and ordering quietly. I didn't recognize her until she sent a note back through Jerry, asking if the chef could recommend a wine pairing. I came out myself, curious about the request. When I saw her, the resemblance was unmistakable. Same dark eyes, same careful way of holding herself, same underlying intensity. "You're Amelie," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Please, sit. I'm Julia, Dante's sister." "I know," I said, sitting despite my better judgment. "He's told me about you. All good things, I hope. Only good things." She studied me with the same assessing gaze her brother had used that first night. I wanted to meet the woman who has my brother singing while he works. Apparently, it's disturbing our accountant. "He doesn't sing," I said, unable to hide my smile. "He absolutely does," Julia corrected. "French songs, mostly. Loudly and badly while he reviews contracts in his office." The image made warmth bloom in my chest. "He's happy," Julia continued, her voice softening. "For the first time since our grandmother died, he's actually happy. Not just content or satisfied or successfully managing his responsibilities. Happy. That's all I wanted. That's all any of us should want. I'm not trying to change him," I said, needing her to understand, or pull him away from his family or his responsibilities. I know what his world is, what it requires. "Good," she replied, "because he needs someone who understands, who sees him completely and stays anyway. Our parents, the rest of the family, they only see the heir, the successor, the man who will preserve and expand what generations built. They don't see the person who makes bouillabaisse at midnight because it reminds him of being young. You see that person." "I'm trying," I said, "but it's complicated." "It is," Julia agreed. "It always will be. But complicated doesn't mean wrong, just challenging." She stayed for dinner, and we talked about Dante, about their childhood, about the pressure of being a Caruso, and the cost of defying expectations. By the time she left, I felt like I'd gained an ally, someone who understood what it meant to love someone while also loving their complex, sometimes dark reality. Meeting his father was different. Dante brought me to the family estate on a Sunday afternoon, his jaw tight with tension, as we drove through iron gates and up a long driveway lined with old trees. "This is a bad idea," I said for the third time. "He wants to meet you," Dante replied, "and I'm tired of keeping you separate from this part of my life. His father is going to hate me." "Probably. But he hates everyone initially. It's kind of his thing." The house, because calling it anything else would be an understatement, was massive. Old money architecture, the kind that spoke of generations of wealth and power. We were shown into a study by staff who moved with quiet efficiency, and I tried not to feel completely out of my depth. Antonio Caruso stood when we entered. He was older than I expected, late 60s maybe, but still formidable. Same eyes as Dante, same controlled power, same underlying sense of coiled violence barely restrained. "Father," Dante said, his hand firm on my lower back, "this is Amélie Rousseau. Amélie, my father." Antonio's gaze swept over me, assessing and dismissive in equal measure. "The chef," he said, making it sound like an accusation. The woman who has my son rejecting suitable matches to spend his evenings in restaurant kitchens? I prefer to think of it as the woman who makes your son happy, I replied, refusing to be intimidated. But yes, I'm a chef. Happy, Antonio repeated, like the concept was foreign. Dante is the heir to significant responsibilities. Happiness is less important than duty. Family. Legacy. With respect, Mr. Caruso, I disagree. Happiness is what makes duty bearable. Legacy is meaningless if built on misery. Antonio's eyes narrowed. You have opinions. I have a voice, I corrected, and I use it. Dante can decide for himself what matters most. Duty and happiness aren't mutually exclusive. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then, unexpectedly, Antonio's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. You have spine, he said, more than the simpering daughters of our associates, who smile and agree with everything. Julia said you were interesting. She undersold it. Is this your approval? I asked, genuinely uncertain. This is me acknowledging that my son could have chosen worse, Antonio replied. Though I still think this is a complication we don't need. You're not from our world. You don't understand the stakes, the expectations. Then help me understand, I said. Instead of dismissing me, explain what you're worried about. Dante's hand tightened on my back, but he didn't interrupt. I'm worried about distraction, Antonio said bluntly. I'm worried about vulnerability. Enemies look for weaknesses, and caring about someone outside our protection makes you weak. I'm worried that my son will prioritize personal happiness over family necessity at a critical time. And I'm worried, he continued, his gaze shifting to Dante, that you're using this relationship to avoid decisions you don't want to make about your future and your responsibilities to this family. The accusations hung in the air. Dante's voice, when he finally spoke, was cold. I'm using this relationship for exactly what it is. A connection to someone who sees me as a person, not a chess piece. Someone who challenges me to be better, not just more ruthless. Someone who makes me want to build something worth leaving behind, not just maintain what we've always had. If you see that as weakness, then we have fundamentally different definitions of strength. Antonio's expression didn't change. We'll see, he said finally. Time will tell if love makes you stronger or gets you killed. On that warm and fuzzy note, Dante said dryly, I think we're done here. We left quickly, Dante's anger radiating off him in waves. In the car, I reached over and took his hand. That went better than expected, I said, trying to lighten the mood. How is that better? He basically called you a liability. He also called me interesting and said I have spine. For Antonio Caruso, that's practically a declaration of love. Dante laughed despite himself. You're insane. Possibly. But I'm your insane person now. Deal with it. The months continued. I learned to navigate Dante's world while maintaining my own. The restaurant thrived under the new ownership, and Dante made good on his promise to support my career without controlling it. When a food critic from a major publication came and gave us a glowing review, specifically mentioning the chef's French training and passion, he celebrated like it was his own achievement. When I was offered a position at a Michelin-starred restaurant in the city, he encouraged me to take the interview, even though it would mean less time together. I didn't take the job. Not because he asked me not to, but because I realized I was happy where I was. Happy singing in a kitchen I understood. Happy with the life we were building. Happy with the balance I'd found between my dreams and our reality. But happiness in Dante's world was always temporary. The real test came on a cold November night. I was closing the restaurant, the last one in the building as usual, when the kitchen door slammed open. 3 men I'd never seen before filled the space, and everything I'd learned about reading danger screamed that this was bad. Where's Caruso? the one in front demanded. "Not here," I said, forcing my voice steady. "He doesn't work in the kitchen." "Don't play stupid," another one snarled. "We know he owns this place. We know you're his woman. So you're going to call him and tell him to meet us here, or things get ugly for you." My phone was in my bag across the kitchen. I calculated distances and odds, and came up short. "I'm just the chef," I tried. "I don't have any involvement in his business dealings." "That's not our problem," the first man said, pulling out a gun I'd hoped I'd never see pointed at me. "Make the call." The door behind them opened so quietly I almost missed it, but they didn't miss the cold press of metal against the back of the first man's head, or the appearance of two more men flanking their group. "Drop it," Dante's voice said, deadly calm. "Or I redecorate my new kitchen with your brains and send your associates back to whoever was stupid enough to send you here." The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Then the gun clattered to the floor, and Dante's men had all three intruders on their knees, hands behind their heads. Dante walked past them like they were furniture, coming straight to me. His hands cupped my face, his eyes scanning me for injury. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "I'm fine," I managed, though I was shaking. "How did you know?" "I always know," he said. "You think I'd leave you unprotected? There are always people watching. Always." He turned to the men on the floor, and his voice dropped to something that made ice run down my spine. "You came into my place of business," he said softly. "Threatened someone I care about. Someone under my protection. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me who sent you. Then you're going to go back and deliver a message. That anyone who even thinks about touching what's mine will learn very quickly why people don't cross the Caruso family." The interrogation that followed was brief and brutal. I didn't watch. Couldn't watch. But I heard enough to understand that this was a warning from a rival family, testing boundaries, seeing if Dante's known relationship with me made him vulnerable. When it was over, his men hauled the intruders out, and Dante came back to me. I was sitting on the floor now, my chef's coat still on, my hands still shaking. He crouched in front of me, his expression raw. "I'm sorry," he said. "I knew this was a risk. I knew being with me painted a target on you. But I was selfish enough to think I could protect you from all of it." "You did protect me," I said. "Your people were here. You were here. Nobody got hurt." "This time," Dante said. "But they tried, Amélie. They came for you to get to me. And they'll try again if they think it will work." "So what do we do?" I asked, meeting his eyes. "Do I run? Do you send me away to keep me safe? Do we pretend this isn't real?" "No," he said firmly. "We make sure it never happens again. We make an example so clear that no one ever makes this mistake twice. And then, if you still want me after seeing this side of my world, we move forward. But I won't blame you if this is too much, if you decide you can't live with the danger." I thought about it, really thought about it, about the fear I'd felt when those men came through the door, about the violence I'd heard, but not seen, about the reality of loving someone whose enemies would use me as leverage. And I thought about the alternative, walking away, being safe, but alone. Going back to a life where I sang in an empty kitchen and no one really listened, where I cooked for strangers and came home to silence, where I was invisible again. "No," I said finally, "I'm not running. But I need you to teach me how to be safer, how to protect myself, how to exist in your world without being a liability." Dante pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'll teach you everything," he promised. "And I'll make sure everyone knows that touching you means declaring war on the entire Caruso family. I'm not giving you up, Amélie. Not now. Not ever." The aftermath of that night changed things. Dante assigned permanent security. Discreet, but constant. I learned to notice the men in suits who always seemed to be nearby, learned to check my surroundings, learned the protocols for if something went wrong. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like armor. The rival family who'd sent the warning received their response. I didn't ask for details, but the message must have been clear, because no one else tried anything similar. And Dante's family, including his father, seemed to accept that I wasn't going anywhere, that I'd proven I could handle the reality of their world. 6 months after that night, Dante took me back to the place where it all started, the restaurant where I'd first sung loud enough for him to hear, where he'd first sat at table 12 and watched me through the kitchen window, where everything had changed. He'd closed it for the evening, just like he had once before, and filled it with flowers and candles and the particular magic that came from transforming ordinary spaces into extraordinary moments. In the center of the dining room, he took my hand. "When I met you," he said, "I'd given up on finding something real. I'd resigned myself to duty and obligation, and a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt hollow. Then I heard you singing about Paris while making beurre blanc, and everything shifted." "You shifted everything," I replied, unable to look away from his eyes. "You saw me when I felt invisible. You listened when I needed to be heard. You made me believe that love could be complicated and difficult and still worth choosing every single day." Dante dropped to one knee, and my breath caught. He pulled out a ring, simple and beautiful, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds that caught the candlelight. "Marry me, Amélie Rousseau," he said, "not because it's practical, or because it makes sense to anyone else. Marry me because I love you, because you sing Piaf while cooking, and you're not afraid of my darkness, and you make me want to be better than I am. Marry me because life without you singing in my kitchen feels impossible." "Yes," I said, the word barely a whisper. "Yes to everything." He slid the ring onto my finger, then rose to kiss me, and in that moment, I understood that sometimes the most dangerous decisions, the ones that should terrify us, the ones that defy logic and safety and every rational thought, are also the ones that lead us exactly where we're supposed to be. We married 3 months later in a small ceremony that blended both worlds. My family, his family, legitimate business associates, and the ones who operated in shadows, all gathered to witness two people from different lives choosing to build something new together. My grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit, connected me to her memory, and Dante's grandmother's recipe for wedding soup connected him to his. We served real food, no pretentious catering, just honest cooking that spoke of love and tradition and the things that matter. And during the reception, when the DJ took a break, I sang, a cappella in French, with Dante's hand in mine. La Vie en Rose, the song about seeing life through rose-colored glasses, about love that transforms everything. My voice wasn't perfect, but it was true. And Dante, this dangerous man who'd rejected 50 marriages to wait for something real, looked at me like I was every answer he'd ever needed. The future wouldn't be easy. His business would always carry risks. My career would demand time and energy. We would navigate the complexity of blending worlds that didn't naturally fit together. But as we danced in a room full of people who'd gathered to celebrate us, as I rested my head against his chest and felt his heartbeat strong and steady beneath my cheek, I knew that some dangers were worth embracing. Some complications were worth accepting. Some loves were worth every risk, because he saw me, truly saw me, the woman who sang in French and cooked with passion and refused to be diminished by anyone's expectations. And I saw him, not just the heir or the boss or the dangerous man with shadows in his past, but the person who remembered his grandmother's kitchen, who made bouillabaisse at midnight, who listened to me sing like it was the most beautiful sound in the world. That night, as we left the reception in a shower of rice and well-wishes, as we drove toward the loft that was now ours instead of just his, as we started the next chapter of a story that had begun with a desperate song and a stranger's attention, I sang one more time, softly, just for him. Quand il me prend dans ses bras, il me parle tout bas. Je vois la vie en rose. When he takes me in his arms and speaks to me softly, I see life through rose-colored glasses. And Dante, my husband, my partner, my choice despite every warning and every risk, sang with me, off-key and imperfect and absolutely true. The cold Mafia boss who'd rejected 50 arranged marriages had finally found what he was looking for. And the chef who sang in French had finally found someone who truly listened. Together, we'd build something better than either of us could have created alone. Something honest and complicated and dangerously beautiful. Something worth singing about